Welcome back to HCI-Space, a podcast where we explore the world of human-computer interactions through conversation with people that design the future of how we learn, live, and connect with technology. I'm your host, Aditya Singh, and this week we're joined by Professor Eric Paulos, who is a professor of electrical engineering and computer science at UC Berkeley. Hi, Dr. Paulos. How are you doing today?
Great. Good to see you, Aditya. Thanks for putting this on.
Absolutely. So before actually diving into your recent work, I'd like to start each episode with the same question. It helps us understand not just what you work on, but why. So with that in mind, generally, how did you get into HCI, and was there a specific moment or project that really pulled you into this space?
Oh, what a great question. Yeah, and I think this will be part of the context for everything we talk about, but often being true to what your passions are and letting things discover you along the way. I think for me, maybe many of your listeners identify with this. I like kind of tinkering with things. I liked mechanical things. A long time ago was obviously Legos and building things. I like physical stuff. And then, as a little bit older, I would sort of wrench on cars and motorcycles and machines and those kinds of things. And then I also like computers. It was a little bit different time back then, so a little bit different kinds of computers, but I like programming them. And I got into school here at Berkeley. I was an undergrad. I basically learned. I didn't want to do computer science. I said I'm going to do something else, but I took a computer science class as just on a whim, and it was just natural for me, and I liked that. But to your point about HCI, I was nearing the end of my kind of time learning computer science, all the things that people would identify, if it's operating systems or cybersecurity or lots of things. And I wanted to continue, but I also knew I didn't want to just code. I wanted to do physical things. And that's when actually before HCI, I found robotics. And robotics was this field that combined that kind of mechanical kind of interest for me, along with programming and that creative spirit. And in that space, I ended up doing some work on more what we would now identify as kind of human robot interaction, like how robots are less like maybe something you'd imagine in a shop floor, assembling things or doing automation, but how can you interact with them in ways that they are either with telepresence and there's other humans communicating through them. And that was kind of a transition point for me. I know there's a little bit of a long lead up, but for me, it was when I realized I was also really interested in that human side. Like, what is that experience for people to interact with these devices or through these devices to other humans? And there's a whole field in HCI about computer mediated communication. And that was also something I explored for a while. So very, very, I don't know if there's this exact moment, but certainly this inflection point of discovering robotics and then discovering how it could help in this human side of interaction.
Yeah, it's a really interesting answer. Yeah, I think that's especially interesting because it's just I feel like it's just an interesting answer because you delved into computer science initially, and then you delved into robotics, and then these other unique fields, and then you kind of found a passion for all of them, and I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but you wanted to kind of combine all those fields together and then find a passion through that.
Yeah, and one of the things about HCI is it really intersects, there's usually some technical disciplinarity. There's also thinking about humans and society. It's thinking about ethics. It's thinking about the planet. It's a lot of things that feel humanist and also technology and also ethical at the same time. There's a lot of things that kind of come together. And one of the magical things is really being creative. And some of the things that I've had the fortune to do have also been even more artistic. And that's clearly where some of the things we do now in design are about creating new, compelling experiences. But it's not formulaic. It's much more being a humanist in a world of, I would say, technology as this kind of creative material, the same way you would be creative as a sculptor with clay or a painter with acrylics or oils. It's like, how do you look at this technology, deconstruct it, so really understand it? That's a big part of understanding the material, which is these technologies. But then I love the energy of working with students and trying to reimagine how they can come together to improve health and well-being and happiness and create broadening participation in society, and just a wide range of things. It's a super exciting time, and it's a cross-cutting discipline, and we really embrace so many different perspectives. So you don't just hang out with computer scientists, you hang out with a lot of different disciplinary expertise.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And before we delve like deeper into HCI, a lot of people might not even know what HCI is. So can you like explain it in a way that would make sense to high school, or just like a quick definition you might have?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone who uses any bit of technology has experienced some thoughtful design by an HCI designer or researcher. So I think all those elements, it's human and the computer and the interaction, and it's thinking about those three elements and how they come together. The easiest example is almost everyone obviously has, say, a smartphone or some device, and every bit of the design, if you touch it, you pick it up, how you hold it, how it displays information to you and communicates that, how it makes sounds, or how it renders things. All of that, a designer has spent a huge amount of time trying to understand how humans will use that. But I also, sometimes people focus on that little bit of technology. HCI also encompasses things you might not think of as technology. So even things you like, an elevator with its buttons, that's also like a bit of technology, or a crosswalk sign, all these kinds of things that have some interaction. A designer has thought about and iterated on and developed a range of different kinds of ways to experience it. I don't know if there's like the most simple definition, but it's essentially, most people understand there's a computer maybe doing computation, and sometimes we don't see what's happening. But every moment that you are interacting with it, either you are touching or, um, talking, or any kind of interaction, and it's also giving something back. It's showing you information on a screen, it's making sounds, it could give off an odor, it could be pushing back as a new texture. I mean, all of that is like this exciting space of human computer interaction.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting answer, because a lot of people might think HCI is just related to, computers or AI, but it's really like any kind of bit of technology, even like, as you said, stop signs related, any interaction between humans and technology. But yeah, so with that being said, I wanted to kind of shift into something that's been a big focus of your recent work, unmaking. And you've obviously been a part of a growing community of researchers looking at unmaking not just as the opposite of making, but as its own critical designing process and something reflective of something creative. And so, with that being said, can you define what unmaking is, and just give a simple example of unmaking in your work? Something you took apart, rethought, or even chose not to build.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we get to do, and it's a huge privileged position, is as a researcher, I'm not working for a company to produce a product for, say, the next 6 months or 12 months. So we are able to envision out and try to think through kind of where will society want to be? What kinds of challenges might they face? Where can the technology lend some new way of looking at something or engaging with some kind of new phenomenon or material? And so some of the projects we do, they're hard to see in the moment why that's having an effect. But there's a long history of projects that I've worked on where um, we developed some technology. People said, this is a really horrible idea, I don't know why you did this. And then it's a product like 6 to 10 years later. And so there's a lot of like examples of that, which I won't go into right here, but just to frame up that some of the things that we do are trying to help grapple with and have conversations about what technology might need to deliver to us as humans, as society, not next year, but many years out. And so I think, again, without retracing my whole career, we've often done things that are a little bit contrarian. And there's intentionality behind that because, again, if we design things that feel like the obvious thing you should do in the next year, I feel there's some tremendous entrepreneurs and there's a lot of energy around people that are innovating in that space. In an academic setting, we have a little bit of this privilege to try to take a deeper look and explore things further out. And so that's certainly what we've done in the past. And I've felt proud of the work that I've done with the students that I've gotten a chance to work with. And you mentioned like recently this work about unmaking. So one of the things is I'm faculty here in electrical engineering computer science, but I also have the privilege of being part of this Jacobs Institute for Design Innovation. This is an institute here. It's a building. If I don't know any of your listeners, if you have like a maker space or you've ever tinkered with things, or I don't know, built a birdhouse or a tree house. I mean, anything you kind of made, this is a space for coming together and making and building. And clearly there's tools and resources to do that with a digital lens. Lots of fascinating things. And that's great. I encourage if anyone's in Berkeley to come by. It's Jacobs Hall. You're welcome to come through. It's a great maker space. But what's happening is we're trying to bring together, again, what I was alluding to earlier, multiple disciplines to think about the challenges around people and planet and society. Now, to get to the point about the unmaking, there's a lot of work clearly about how do you design things and make them, how do you make them more robust, how do you make them, improved for people with differing abilities or, impairments, all kinds of things that you might want to design and build from the small to the large. But unmaking was a little bit of it's a research project that we've worked on, but it's also a philosophy. And it's really, I find that a lot of the work I do also has some roots in being inspired by artists. And there was an art movement on auto-destructive art. And it was sort of this idea about art that maybe it decays over time. So maybe it changes. And everybody knows this phenomenon, something that has a patina that grows on it, or something that breaks over time, or maybe it fades from the UV light. There's all kinds of things that happen over time. And this was basically thinking through, we have technologies that help us, like CAD, this computer assisted design, where you can model things and then you can use a digital fabrication tool like a 3D printer to print them. So you can do all this fascinating making. And we've done a lot of work in that. It's super empowering to be able to kind of iterate and make physical things that are really interactive. But we also thought, how could you make something that also designed into the making was how it was going to unmake itself? And it sounds counterintuitive because you're like, well, why would you want something to fall apart or unmake itself? And it's a little bit intentionally provocative in that nomenclature. But what's really trying to go on is there's a couple layers to what we're trying to do. One is to at least deflect a little bit of the conversation into what does it mean when to unmake? Why are we only focused on kind of celebrating this refined final object, which, this is beautiful and it's perfect, but maybe there's an afterlife and there's a sustainability issue of, should it come apart to be recycled? Should it have materials in it that are more sustainable? And another thing is, there's actually something beautiful about if you could design in properties of unmaking, things could be very different. You could have objects that maybe over time transition from one, maybe it's a coffee cup and then it becomes, a planter for a pot. And maybe that's because the handle breaks off or something else. There's a delight in even gift giving. If I gave you something and, after you used it 32 times, something happened. So it's actually, there's a dynamism to it, that the object is not done and it still has more interaction and more kind of delight to deliver as it unfolds. It's not a finished object. And it celebrates a little bit of, could a designer participate in the whole life cycle of something? So there's a lot of different there's a little bit of an art gesture. There's a sustainability argument. There's a questioning of like, are we designing the right tools that just are for making? And again, I'm willing to be proven wrong on certain aspects, but I often like to invite a broader conversation about things. And so that was very much about, could we talk a little bit more about unmaking? And that sort of led to a broader area of work that I would say is around still interactive electronics, so things that sound like they're HCI, but can you do that with sustainable materials? So can you imagine, again, we're not going to build a supercomputer or a new smartphone, but there are certain kinds of electronics that you can design with organic or sustainable materials, and you can have some limited interaction. And we've done things with, can we use basically leaves to do some heating? We can do some, we've actually designed a battery which is completely biodegradable. You can actually eat it, although it tastes horrible. So I don't suggest you do that. We're trying to figure out, can we detect wildfires? Can we transmit wireless signals? These are all normal things that I could mock something up in, easily an afternoon. But when it's with sustainable materials, it's really challenging. But I think one of the things that HCI and design really flourishes is when you have constraints. And that's, I think, always, any project needs constraints. That's why it's the paper that you're writing for class has got to be so many pages, or it has to have certain things in it. So I think, yeah, that's basically a gesture around sustainability and around some new research.
I see. That's a excellent answer. It covers a lot of aspects. And actually, I wanted to ask you a question specifically about like the types of like things you would or I guess like how would you personally tell the difference between just like tossing something out or unmaking it in a way that's actually meaningful? Or do you just unmake, do you think there's a potential to unmake potentially anything that's made?
These are philosophical questions now, Aditya. Yeah, I mean, and obviously not, yeah, I would say there are certain things that will certainly be kind of end of life, and they do need to we need to find ways to recycle them. But I think everybody's had that moment where they see something that's maybe, I don't know, it's like a family member says like, oh, that's broken, and you go, wait, I could still use that. I can turn it into, I don't know, a fish tank, or I could change that into, like, I need something that will hold my, something on a shelf, or there's all kinds of redesigns. And I think some of it is helping open up a little bit more awareness of where those things can have new life. I mean, it even maps into, I would say, most of you probably, I don't know if it's in your house or your room or your garage, maybe you have, there's probably a shovel there, and there's maybe like a broom, and there's things you're not using all the time. And you would probably gladly like share these with your neighbors. This kind of partial ownership model, but we don't have a mechanism to kind of, I mean, as a thought experiment, what if you're, I don't know, you have your skateboard. It was like, hey, Aditya has not been riding me for a while, so I want a new home. Anyone want a skateboard? And kind of almost like advertise to the neighbors. You might not want this because your skateboard now has a personality, and now you have to kind of spend time nurturing this relationship with your skateboard. But these are the fun thought experiments of, again, that's already happening, right? I think many of your listeners, they're used to, you know, uh, these ride sharing apps, lots of things that are shared where you don't own like a vehicle and all these things. You basically, just in time, you want those. And so that's a very optimistic and hopeful future, that maybe that applies more broadly, that we become a little bit more open to sharing these kind of things that we have. And I think, to your question, I mean, it's back to, maybe this is quote unquote broken to me, but it has a new life with someone else. And I don't know what the exact answer is to that, but I think having a greater awareness that things can have, other lives, and especially if they're designed in to kind of break apart or decay or deform or morph, and then now they have new usability in their new form or their new structural integrity. That's like very exciting to think about. It's research, so we don't have like, here's the companies that are doing it, but companies do very much want to have sustainable ways of operating, because just, of course, lowering costs, but they're very well aware of it's helping with the planet, it's helping with efforts that they want to further as a company.
I see. Yeah, that's a great answer. And yeah, so moving on to the next question. Do you think on this topic of unmaking, do you think it's more important to focus on actually making or unmaking in design? Because I asked this because once personally I deleted a school project and I had to start over because it was on a drive and I lost it. But what surprised me was how starting again helped me see things that I had initially missed to make a stronger overall project. But at the same time, also remember how exciting it was when the original version was coming together and I was finally getting some momentum going. And so as you had also mentioned earlier, unmaking is a process that takes years down the line. So do you think we should value this momentum over creating ideal novelties? Like specifically, do you think we should push for earlier deadlines, more momentum / efficiency to get products out there, or sit back, iterate longer by making and unmaking to come up with like the ideal product? Yeah. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, and I'm sure everybody's had that experience of like, I love that you shared this story, you of like losing this. I've definitely had that. I lost some document and you're like, that was so perfect. And you will claim to the end of the world that it was the perfect document. But maybe in the back of your mind, I don't know if you'd agree to this, but like by going through the process again, something new emerged. And people talk about writing, right? How you throw away your first draft and do something else. Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, the unmaking, that can be very on a shorter time scale. It's just that the research agenda might be further out until it's kind of adopted. But I think you hit on another point, which is important about kind of the direction that I think is exciting about HCI. I think a lot of people might think, okay, it needs to be very technical, it has to be very efficient, it has to be like optimized, and everything's about fast and accurate. And yes, we want that for our devices, our air traffic controllers or people piloting planes or running the Bay Area BART system. But also the human side. We're humans. Humans also, we like things at different paces. Sometimes we like things when they're slow. We like to sit down. We like when things are not kind of always thrown at us. And so there's a lot of thinking about not having things be distracting and disruptive too. And intentionally trying to, I think one of the points was like, one thing we often do is this iterative design. So the whole cycle of HCI is usually, you brainstorm some idea, or you might observe people, and then you'll design it, and that could be prototyping it in paper or cardboard. We're not always like building full electrical complete systems. We show that to users, and we observe and study it in some practice. It could be watching it in practice or just interviewing people about it, and then we iterate on that, and that cycle continues. So we're always throwing out ideas anyway. So there's already this unmaking that I would say probably most people that do great work, not even HCI or computer scientists. I think anyone, if you are working as an economist or as an artist or as a musician, you're like iterating on your design, you're improving it. But I think this one thing to emphasize is that often I'll have students, they'll come into class and they think, okay, the most technically advanced project is going to win the day. And I would argue I like technology. I'm, a nerd like a lot of folks, but also there's got to be a poetry in it. And I think that it has to touch the human soul in some way. It has to resonate with some values we have as humanists. I'll give you an example. We did a project a number of years ago where we said, what if it was a slightly different, similar to this unmaking, we had this notion of counter-functional design. And that's a little bit of an odd concept. It was like, how do you make something that still retains some of its main functionality, but it actually counters some of the things that you would expect from it? And that sounds weird, so I'll give you an example. What we did is we looked at a camera, and everyone would go, okay, I know a camera. What does it do? It takes pictures. You can look at the pictures. You can share the pictures. You can delete the picture. Whatever. We can go on a long list. And we said, but we're going to constrain that. And we did various designs, and I'll just tell you one of them. One of them was, it was called the prompt cam, and you could only take a picture when it prompted you. A little light turned on, and you could take a picture, and it had multiple lenses, so it had one front facing and one rear facing. And this was a camera that, and we had variations of, like, you could only look at the pictures if you were with the people that you were around again, or you could look at them exactly a year later. I mean, you could imagine all these variations, but this one, you couldn't even use it until there was this moment, and then it was usable. And obviously it was about this heavily constrained experience. And we did that. We published this work. It had a whole argument about slowing down, having slow technology, having things that were constrained. And we've had that in a lot of different, as a philosophy in a lot of the research. But of course, some people are like, this is a stupid idea. Why you want, people want more pictures and more storage, and they want more access and more sharing. And we might argue for some of that, that happens, but it was interesting. I'm not sure how popular it is now, but recently Be Real, one of these like tools, came out. For the listeners that maybe not aware, it gives you an alert. It says it's time to be real, and you have like a minute or two to take a picture, and it's supposed to be capturing you kind of like impromptu in this everyday setting. But it was funny, we did that research about 15 years before that, saying like, this is an interesting phenomenon. People said that's a stupid idea, people would never want that. And then there's a hugely popular social media platform that basically takes that constraint, and people embraced it. Why? I can tell you, as a human computer interaction researcher, because it feels human. It feels there's something genuine about it, that by the time we got to the proliferation of all of the social media, people were overwhelmed. They were like, I would welcome something that slows me down, feels a little different.
So obviously your answer is really interesting. I love how you connected it to Be Real. It's a pretty popular app right now. I feel like a lot of people could relate to that. But yeah. So following through with the question, in your experience, do people actually take time to make something, unmake it, reflect, and rebuild, or are they just in a rush to finish it to meet deadlines and expectations?
Yeah, well, I think that the short answer is yes, they do all those. I mean, one of them is, I think there's a lot of times we need to just do things. They're urgent. They need our attention. But I think there's also things that we do want to reflect on. We want to have more appreciation, and we're not going to take everything apart. That's not like the point of this. That's a little bit of an extreme reading of what the kind of philosophy is. But a little bit of certain things might have this idea of an aura to them. So Walter Benjamin talked about this, and it was a little bit more of a kind of almost artistic, philosophical notion. But there might be something, if you look around your room or in your house, that it has meaning, not because it's the highest quality, but you took it on a trip to Europe, or you were like skipping rocks with a friend at a lake, and that was this special rock. They have these kind of backstories. We talk about them as having an aura because of they were around certain experiences that you had with them. And we don't have that as much with technology, where we kind of just have something and then they're all equal. We all have whatever, an iPhone, or we all have a PS5, and we don't attach an aura to them. And it's not everything will have that, but some things could have that, and we would have a different relationship with them. And HCI researchers also think of the way you think about your technology. Do you kind of nurture it? And people say, I don't nurture my technology, it's just a thing. But I would argue maybe you do a little bit. You maybe go, is my phone charged? Or like, is it like protected? Is it in the right safe place? These are nurturing characteristics that you would have for, a pet or a loved one. And it's well known. I'm sorry if you're hearing it here for the first time, but you apply human-like qualities to these inanimate technologies, not all the time and not at that depth, but certain things. So understanding that and thinking through that as part of the design is an exciting part of what we do too. But the taking apart is just more can people, um, maybe it's a little bit of deconstructing and understanding how things come together. Not everything is a prepackaged, purchase that you make. Some things can be reimagined and rethought of. Of course, we don't expect this at scale because, well, you would basically go out of your mind if you had to do this with every object. But also, right now, I would claim the conversation is much more about a consumerism of buying prepackaged or pre-made items. And what do people do anyway? They do a little customization. There's some bespoke kind of elements to them. Anything from putting stickers on things to maybe some people modify their keyboards, or they do things with, companies that try to do this with like the backgrounds on your screens and stuff. But I would say we did a bunch of work with wearables for a decade or so, and people think of that as, oh, that's like a Fitbit or a smartwatch or something. But we were saying, what, there could be lots of other, we tried to just investigate other landscapes. So we did things with clothing, we did things with skin. You could have kind of temporary tattoos that were interactive. We did things with I don't know, shoes and hats and fingernails and hair. Believe it or not, I don't have hair, but my students do. So they did some really cool stuff with hair. One of my students went on to Adobe, which is a company people are used to, like Adobe software product, but they have a small group that does hardware. And she did this amazing job creating this interactive dress that she designed and engineered and built, and a little bit of a meme hit. She was very popular for a while with this interactive dress. The point is that um, a lot of things that you think are like static and the same should be thought of as having a more dynamic nature. You might just look at the clothing you have on and I have on, and I kind of chose this today. I'm a designer. I chose this as a design, and you chose your clothing as a design. We chose how to get to school today. Those are all design experiences. You have designed all those experiences. But the clothing kind of doesn't change. Maybe it gets dirty or it's sweaty, but I think we've done a lot of work, and others as well. Like, your clothing could change based on who's around you, the time of day, the mood, the atmosphere. My collar could come up or down. It could change textures. There could be ways that the sleeves roll and unroll themselves. There's so many different things you could explore, and I'm just using it as an example that the unmaking and that kind of taking apart is a little bit of reflection that you should approach these artifacts and think of them, how could I remake them into other things? And the same thing, like your clothing, how can it be more dynamic? And again, maybe you don't want this for everything. I don't want to say we're going to some future where everything has to be electronic and interactive, but a lot of that could be very useful, certainly for health and well-being, and a lot of things around people that are having a need to monitor medical conditions. There's a lot of great things that you can do with these kinds of wearables, but they can also be expressive and performative, and that's another exciting thing to think about.
Yeah, I actually really love that answer because I think that's like the explanation you gave is pretty much what HCI is basically giving, these inanimate objects a kind of like dynamic type of view to them and making them as part of our own and giving them a care that we would give to like other types of humans or something, but without like that level of deep love. But it's just seen as something that's dynamic rather than an object, so we can truly think about them like creatively in a way we would do with other humans. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting answer, and I totally resonate with that. But kind of winding down from the research and everything, and to wind down this podcast, I just wanted to ask you, like, what part of the future of HCI most excites you, and what worries you?
Yeah, well, I always say any really interesting technology always has a kind of noir or darker side. In fact, I often have an assignment in my class where I call it design noir, where I say for this week only, we're going to kind of design things with this kind of more dystopian dark side. Not that we want to do that permanently, but by not entering that conversation, we're also doing a disservice to our own design practice. Um, I think for me, like, I'm super excited. I think it's a great time to be doing HCI work because there's such a just broad range of technologies available. I'm thinking back at the beginning of this field, well before I even entered, it was, how will office computers be more efficient and help productivity and things like that. Whereas now it's every every part of our society. And like on a personal note, I obviously I already sort of explained this thing around sustainability. I say my research lab almost looks more like a chemistry lab now because we're really playing with a lot of different materials, and properties of those materials. Because again, when I say technology, most people think, okay, it's a laptop, it's an iPad, it's a smartphone, or these kinds of things. Maybe it's a gaming platform, but we have to think out what will technology be like, again, 5, 10, 15 years from now. And it's going to be not flat glass screens. There's going to be other materials. It's going to be expressive materials that reshape themselves, reform themselves. We're doing some things around food and creating different food flavor sensations in the mouth and textures in the mouth. Um, it's all kind of research and exploratory, but I'm very interested in new materials from a sustainability standpoint, but also how they can be part of a conversation about being part of our kind of an ally in this expressivity and this interactivity, and how we're broadening what we mean by technology. It could be everyday living organisms. It could be things that you don't think of. And so we spend a lot of time trying to think about that. Um, Obviously, I'd be, remiss if I didn't sort of say something about artificial intelligence. This is clearly at the forefront of everything. It's clearly impacting and will continue to impact in really, really great ways so much of our society. And I think there's a lot of dystopian views of what that could become, but it's certainly a very powerful ally in helping us be more creative and more productive and broadening the way that we kind of explore a design space. I think if there was a cautionary tale, it's clearly one about, this AI as a kind of material. It'd be great if we could think of it as a material and be creative with it and have it be kind of co-participating in helping us be more creative as humans. That's what I kind of envision. The same way, many of your listeners probably don't remember this time, but there was a time, believe it or not, before the web existed, and people were like, "Well, what's that going? That's going to cause. Maybe we don't want this." And there's long debates of things. That train left the station. We're going to have network computers. We're going to have the internet. We're going to have the web. We're going to exchange information. We'll have side debates about, of course, important things like who owns musical rights and how can we share things, and all these other things about shopping and such and such. With AI, even more radical and more powerful, and I think it is amazing the things that it's helped like create and help us discover. The cautionary tale is that I think we still can very much steer this as a research direction. It's not out of our control, but very much in the scoping of HCI, we need all of the disciplines to participate in this. And I think one of them is really having, leaders, our government officials, people that are policymakers, kind of helping us untangle and come up with ways that we will find appropriate and thoughtful to use these technologies. We can go on and on about some, very kind of not desired outcomes we could have from this. I'm still convinced that the good will outweigh the bad, and I'm excited about this technology. And I know all of your listeners use this, and it's interesting. I would maybe invite them the next time you're huddle at the lunch. Ask, what are you using AI for? Because I'm discovering new things all the time from people that are using it, and I'm blown away sometimes. I mean, I'm not even able to, I'm giving a lecture and I'm often like something's new came out during my lecture. I can't even keep track of that. But in a nutshell, um, I would say definitely any profession, I don't, no matter what you're doing, you should be spending, 10% of your time just exploring this as an interesting material for your practice. If you're whatever, a writer or a doctor or a landscape architect or a truck driver, I'm every single profession will be touched by this, and helping understand rather than someone telling you how to use it, I would say try to be proactive. And it can be empowering to give voice to communities and people that maybe don't have that. And that's always been something at the core of HCI. And I'm hoping that AI, some of the generative models can do that. Yes, we will definitely hear many dystopian stories to come. There'll be some very, you know, unsettling things, but I'm hoping we can, by the more we talk about it and the more we bring in more practitioners, I'm hoping we can have a really just exciting future when we partner with this technology, because it's powerful. You definitely don't want to leave this behind. It's going to, I think, help you be a better human, and that's at the center of human computer interaction. So it's come full circle.
That's an amazing answer. Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. And, just to kind of summarize, I really liked two insights that you provided today, especially about the dynamic nature of identifying objects as more like people rather than objects themselves, um, as well as just connecting HCI to objects such as like clothing, hair, and nails, rather than just computers or these things we'd commonly identify as technology based. And I think that's really what the crux of HCI is. And I think you did a really, really amazing job in explaining that. And I'm truly appreciative of the time you provided to us for this insight. And yeah, I'm really thankful.
Well, DJ, let me just say thank you for putting together such a just thoughtful, meaningful podcast and a series for people to really reflect on this. I'll just leave with a note just that help. And that is a genuine plea that, many of your listeners and viewers, hopefully they will find an invitation to this, research space and a conversation in there. And I would say my advice is be genuine, follow your passions, do the things you feel that are matter or that are important. Don't let someone say, well, this is, for example, this is computer science and this is not computer science. Like, you should do the things that you feel are kind of important, and you derive kind of notions of kind of feeling good about the things that you're making or doing or the people you're impacting. And I just want to make it clear that could be, as I mentioned earlier, yes, maybe you are involved in some new AI technique for some gene therapy, but it can just as much be you built a very cool, like, treehouse. These are all like useful. Just do the things that are naturally you, and I guarantee you it might not be clear because you think I have to do these career steps. No one's career is a linear path, and you're going to follow things and you're going to be happier at the end because you're going to help co-create